Now, I'm going to be quite honest with all of you. I am not the biggest fan of Victarion Greyjoy. I understand that for many people this is a fan favorite character, and while I definitely understand where the enjoyment of his chapters come from, for me personally, I find that the majority of what make his chapters interesting have nothing to do with his actual character and everything to do with his brother. Now, this is still a video in my reviewing every A Song of Ice and Fire POV character series, so I will analyze this character nonetheless, but I also will dedicate a segment of this video to some criticisms that I have for the character and his position in the story. Victarion Greyjoy sets himself apart in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire POVs by being an actual brute. Many of our characters are quite intelligent, ranging from competent to incredibly intelligent when it comes to the Game of Thrones. Victarion Greyjoy is the opposite, however. Instead of being an intellectual character, he's more of a brute force character. Victarion's chapters are filled to the brim with toxic masculinity, warring, fighting, thoughts of plunder, glory, and everything else that comes with being the commander of the Iron Fleet. So for many, Victarion chapters can be quite enjoyable, because they are a break from the traditional pace of A Song of Ice and Fire. Not only that, but Victarion does have some interesting things going for him. Firstly, and probably the most interesting regarding his character, is his dynamic with his brother Euron. Victarion is not Euron's biggest fan. A few years before the main story, Euron claims to have had an affair with Victarion's fourth wife. This is never fully confirmed, but Victarion then beats her to death to hide his shame. This is something that sticks with Victarion, and for the remainder of the story, he will make decisions with his hatred for Euron in mind. Moving on from that, after the King's Moot, where Victarion gives a very lackluster speech before Euron steals the show, Victarion gets his mission to Daenerys. In this chapter, Euron tells Victarion to sail to Slaver's Bay and propose a marriage pact on his behalf. And in this moment, Victarion accepts, but with a twist. Instead of proposing that Euron and Dany get married, he wants Dany for himself. And he does this because ultimately he views it as a way to get back at his brother. It's petty, it's delusional, and it's the exact kind of plan that a simple-minded person like Victarion would come up with. And along the way to Slaver's Bay, Victarion Greyjoy does what he's always done. He wars and pillages. But there is one key difference to his usual antics. In a battle with Sir Tolbert Sari, Victarion ends up taking a wound to his hand. This wound ends up festering, and the infection is getting worse. And his hand will continue to worsen until his final chapter of A Dance with Dragons, where Victarion Greyjoy finds a red priest floating about in the water. The same priest who was on Tyrion's ship, I might add, Mokaro. And Mokaro burns Victarion's hand to the point of charring it to the elbow in order to get rid of the infection. When it's all said and done, he can still use the hand, and it's actually stronger than it's ever been, but it's not perfect. It's still slightly infected and has to be cleaned and maintained. And that's where we see his story end in Dance with Dragons. A newly burned hand, and heading for Meereen to attempt to take Daenerys as his bride. So with all that being said, I personally find Victarion to be a frustrating character, because I honestly don't think he's wholly necessary as a POV character. Now that might come as a hot take, since a lot of people really enjoy Victarion, but hear me out for a second. To me, Victarion is the perfect example of what I think is one of George R. R. Martin's few issues as a writer. That being his gardening type of writing style, sometimes growing out of control. To to the point where he can sometimes add things that aren't fully necessary to the story. To me, Victarion is such an example. He is simple-minded and very predictable in terms of his arc, and I feel unfortunately this has him fall into the realm of someone that I have seen before, and someone that I think really could be anyone. Granted, this is literally the only POV character that I feel this way about, which is a good thing, but I can't overlook the fact that whenever I'm reading a Victarion chapter, I feel that they aren't always 100% necessary. In fact, the only part of Victarion's story that I find hyper interesting is his dynamic with Euron, and getting to see Euron through Victarion's eyes. This is why I quite like Victarion's second chapter in A Feast for Crows, but because we get a closer look at who Euron is and how he operates on the ground level. But beyond his dynamic with Euron, there just isn't really much to chew on for me when it comes to Victarion's story. I and many other fans of the series support the theory that his goal in marrying Daenerys will fail, and unfortunately, especially considering the fact that there is a good chance Euron is controlling the Dusky Woman, who is the woman Victarion sleeps with on his ship, I feel Victarion may fall into the realm of just becoming a plot device for Euron's much more important story in The Winds of Winter. I will admit that I am making assumptions here, and I'd be glad to be wrong because I want to enjoy every single character in George R. R. Martin's beautiful world, but as it stands right now, in comparison to basically all other POV characters, Victarion falls short for me, because he's just simply not what I'm looking for when I pick up A Song of Ice and Fire. Now with that being said, this is my third video in my series of videos going over and reviewing every single Song of Ice and Fire POV character. I did Aerys Oakheart and Arya Hota already over the past 2 days, and from this point forward, every single character that I'm going to be reviewing are characters that I really do love and enjoy. This bottom 3 are the only ones that I have legitimate criticisms for, the only ones that I find are a little weak in comparison, but from this point forward, it is full steam ahead, and I am really, really excited to get to some of the characters that I genuinely love. Besides that, I just want to say a massive thank you to all of the new subscribers and friends that I've made along my journey of talking about Song of Ice and Fire on this channel. I did not think the channel would grow so much so rapidly, talking about a book series that I didn't even know a lot of people still loved because it's been so long since the last book was released. But I'm so beyond grateful to talk about the series that I love so much, and just thank you all for watching and supporting. With that out of the way, again, thank you for watching this video, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Peace.